Well, Kristy, I'll tell you what, when you've got Fairfax Papers, or former Fairfax Papers, but certainly the Financial Review on its front page, calling this out, you know you're in a bit of strife. States, borderline cruelty's the headline. Morrison and Palaszczuk clash. No new cases, but Queensland stays closed. Qantas urges opening. Queensland's refusal to let a Canberra woman bury her father has inflamed the dispute over arbitrary border closures, escalating a push from government and business for the adoption of a nationally consistent system of coronavirus hotspots rather than blanket bans. It has also further poisoned relations between Scott Morrison and Queensland Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk, who accused the Prime Minister of bullying and intimidating her after he rang her to plead the case of the woman named Sarah Kasich. Well, of course, as I just alluded to, Kristy, having spoken at length today to Peter Credlin, Sky News host, it's very clear that the Prime Minister made an emotional plea. He's lost his father not that long ago. He spoke to the young woman in question. She was in tears. She'd been in isolation in a hotel room for 10 days. And here she was. All she wanted to do was go to the funeral at 2 o'clock today. And the Prime Minister said to Annastacia Palaszczuk, let's just keep this storm, keep it nice and quiet. You come out and say, look, we've had a look at this. We've used our discretion, and as such, she can now go. Instead, Annastacia Palaszczuk jumps up in Parliament, says on Are You OK Day, the day in which Australians challenge each other on our mental health aspects, she says, I've been bullied. I won't be intimidated by the Prime Minister. And you know what? Scott Morrison polled 58-42, two-party preferred in Queensland at the last federal election. He's a very, very popular man in Queensland. If it comes down to a match as to whose credibility people are going to take in this state, I'm telling you now, Morrison wins by the length of the Flemington Strait.
You're right, Glee. So people know that Scott Morrison is not seeking to bully Annastacia Palaszczuk when he has asked for a request that to be kept quiet, and it's her that's publicised it, and it's her that's trying to make political mileage out of Sarah and her family, and is disgraceful. Those two ministers who resigned today, they have restored their personal integrity, I would say. And even more disgraceful, the Premier refuses to accept blame for any of these tragic situations that she's presided over. At least Daniel Andrews stands up and says the buck stops with me. He does then like to try and dispute who gave him the buck, but one of his oft-quoted phrases is the buck stops with me, as she simply just refuses to acknowledge that she has any responsibility, passing it off to unelected public servant officials who are doing nothing but working along the instructions of the government of the day, because the government wants to get to an election.
Well, that's the other thing, Kristy, and I'll move on very quickly now to the telly, but, you know, the Premier told the Prime Minister that she'd take on board his plea, pass it on to the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jeanette Young, and see what and rely on her expert medical advice. Now, that's what she provides. She provides advice. That's what senior bureaucrats do. It's then up to the politicians, the elected politicians, to make the call, make a judgment, show some discretion, reject the application, show some compassion. I mean, she's forever throwing Jeanette Young under the bus because she's the one who is coming up with these particular edicts